everyone. Welcome to The Heart of It, where we talk all things family life from a Christ-centered and Orthodox perspective. I'm Clara Bertan, and we're so blessed to have on the broadcast with us Father Augustine Ibrahim. Welcome, Abuna.
Good to see you. Good to see you.
Okay, Abuna, so I'm really excited to have this conversation with you today. And you have such a heart for the youth and a zeal, right? Like there's a fire inside that I know we're going to hopefully unpack together.
No fire.
No, it's the refining fire. It's a good fire. And so I'm really hoping to leverage that heart for the youth, the connections for our topic today, which is how we as parents can help our teens thrive, that we can understand their inner experience a little bit, how that relates to their world, the things that matter to them. And so before we dive into our topic, I was hoping you would do one fun would you rather question with us.
Absolutely. Totally down.
Okay, awesome. So this is a very serious question.
Yes.
Okay, so if you had the choice, would you rather be Spider-Man or Batman?
Batman every time. It's not even a question. The reason it's Batman is because that means that you are smart, you are, you have money, and you have a cave that you can hide from everybody, right? Like Spider-Man hides in his mom's house, never for her aunt's house. Never forget that.
Yes, okay.
That's a big deal. Okay. I've got my own cave. That's what I need.
Okay. I love the conviction.
And it's not bad on the wardrobe change either.
Yeah.
Wardrobe change is free. It's
Black.
pretty on par.
Black.
Right? And I can work nights differently now.
Okay. I like that you get to be Batman and a priest at the same time. I like the implication here.
Think about it. You're
Yes.
doing liturgies in the day and you're taking
Yes.
care of bad guys at night. I like that a lot better than some of the other stuff we have to do.
Okay, I'm convinced. I'm convinced. Okay. I like that there's no outfit change. Okay, very good. Thank you, Abuna. And so let's dive into our conversation today. And so part of it is being a parent who's on that cusp, of having children that are about to enter into those teen years and talking to a lot of parents who maybe I find there's a pendulum that swings from the parent that's incredibly apprehensive about the teen years, or there's no shift in how we transition with our children into those years. So really trying to avoid either that fear or being consumed by what adolescence can be all about, or not making any adjustments either. And so trying to, again, leverage that experience that you have. And from those conversations that you're having with teens, with youth, what are you finding are some of those common struggles, whether spiritual or emotional, that they're up against, that they're facing?
That's such a great question. What I find, well, first of all, I want to clarify by saying I will never sit here and say that I'm a child or a parenting expert, right? And so everything we say is through our experiences, through what we've studied, what we've learned over the course of our lives, and what God really kind of provides to us. I'm not sitting here telling people you're all parenting the wrong way. I think that's unfair. And kids, I understand everything. I'm still learning their lingo, all this nonsense that they use now.
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
it's
like
whatever.
So much grace. There has to be so much grace in this process.
Yeah. But what I find are some of the big challenges. The identity component is so huge. And the identity, many times as we talk about it from a gender perspective and what the world is really throwing at them now, but it's going deeper than that. It's who am I and do I love myself? Like this idea of loving who you are and leaning into that. Like as youth ourselves, I think we struggled with that insecurity. Your body's changing, your voice is changing, your hormones are activating, and you're being challenged by this new landscape that you're in. And so there's a battle of like, am I enough? And, the funny thing is they don't even know that they're having this battle, but it's all over their behavior. When you see youth acting out, right? Extremely loud, extremely aggressive, extremely attention seeking. Why? It's because they don't know what elicits attention. So they're just trying to activate something, right? So the idea of knowing who I am and loving who I am, it settles the soul, and they don't even realize that they're battling with that. And then I think the second part is there's the shift of the spiritual identity. You're, up until about 16 is what I tell our youth. It's really your parents' faith, right? And it's the projection of like, you confess with this Abuna, and you do this and you do that. And it's not a blanket statement. Obviously, there are people that think outside of that, and the blessing of our diocese is that you've got, you can throw a rock and hit a priest in the head, every 100 feet, thank God. But for the most part, the spiritual identity has been the parents guiding them, walking them through it as they should. That's their biblical responsibility. But now you start to formulate your own identity with God, right? It's about cultivating your habits, the spirit of service, the spirit of understanding virtue and how to live virtuously. And what does it mean to have a relationship with my God? And this is one of the things that people have a hard time with me saying, but I really believe strongly. When you don't have anything, right? And that was very endemic to our parents' generation, and the struggles of poverty and persecution. You look at God as a provider, and that's the first way that you grasp at him. And so they transmitted that to us. But we have been blessed in the land of abundance to not have the same types of struggles. Yeah. And consequentially, the idea of the provider is not necessarily as prevalent. And so it doesn't resonate as loudly with us. And so the God identity is shifting inside of us to he is the partner. He is the protector. This is now a different shift, right? It's the same God. It's just a different lens that we're looking. And that spiritual identity, I feel like it's a big struggle for them, is they don't understand that God needs to be a partner in your life, that he is a protector from harm, and that he's patient with you, right? And that friendship with God is so important to feel like he's relatable to you, because otherwise God becomes this ethereal idea that you're like, oh, I don't identify with him. I don't connect with him. I'm not this. I'm not that. It's like that's not the answer. Like, don't you want someone to vent to? Don't you want someone to tell all your worries and your fears to? Don't you want someone that understands you? And the floor of faith is knowing that God always loves, God always forgives, and God always understands, right? That's it. And he loves everyone. He forgives those who want to be forgiven. And he understands every struggle. And so I feel like those are really two big areas of like the idea of self-love and leaning into your identity as a person and the spiritual identity. These are two of the major battles that they're facing. And those kind of transmit into things like relationships, social settings, dealing with the ideas of porn, as well as dealing with issues of suicidal ideation and what society is throwing at them. All of that really, they become trickle-down effects from those chief issues that come at the top.
Yeah. And what you're speaking to, I think, Abuna, is the core where everything else kind of springs out.
Exactly.
Of what my identity is, who am I, who do I matter to, what's my purpose, who says those things, who defines those things, and that faith ownership piece that you're speaking to.
Exactly.
Of what it means to translate into now that's something that's real and it's mine. And not just where I'm finding.
Yeah. And myself. Like, think about this, Clara. Like we were talking about it before the podcast started, like the relationship with the father of confession. Like my father of confession in college saved my life. Like he's the person that changed my world. And that comes in that formation of the God identity. Sure. Right? How important that is. And so, every priest in the sacrament of confession is available. Do you connect with that person? Do you see a relatable, connecting, guiding figure? And you got to build that mentorship, right? So that spiritual identity really hinges on what relationship I'm having with God. And am I intentional about selecting a father of confession, connecting with one, having a servant that I identify with? All those things really play together in forming that spiritual identity that's critical to navigating the landscape.
Well, and I think what you're speaking to is discipleship.
Yes.
And what happens when we don't have that, and that's missing a little bit. And, we were going to transition to that into a little bit of part of the conversation, but I think it's a perfect segue into what you're sharing of what then does it mean for me as a parent to cultivate the kind of environment at home or to encourage that kind of relationship, because I imagine the 14-year-old that's waking up one day and it's like, well, now I need to start having a relationship with my father of confession. And what is that built on? Or I'm being asked to do something that feels really foreign. And so what do you see as that transition, or what builds the legs for making that happen?
I love that question. I think this as a parent, modeling is everything. I laugh, I've got a 3-year-old and Isaac models on everything I do, right? Like, if I'm going to bed early on a Saturday night, which is rare, but he's like, we have church in the morning, Daddy. Like, why? Because it's, I'm going, he's going, right? And so that's kind of embedded in him. So the modeling of that partnership with God, and there are many parents, to their credit, who have that relationship of prayer, seeing the Bible out in the house, seeing it not dusty. I always joke when I do visitations and I do a dust test on the Bibles, and I'm like, oh, okay, this is good. This is good. You're doing all right. And I'm joking, but I'm also trying to say, okay, shouldn't have to dredge this up. It should exist constantly in your life. So that's like the first part of the modeling. The second one that I think people don't like that I say is the confession component. Like, confession doesn't die when your father of confession passes away. So for all of our parents, that's something where you'll see, Abuna so-and-so. And it's like, yeah, he was a saint. And I agree. And, there are still saints among us that exist. And you need to have that relationship in confession. Or, ho if a must. Okay, he's in Egypt. Yeah. Okay, well, Badin, like, so what? Like, what are we going to do? You can't get on Zoom. You can't get on FaceTime. You better figure something out, because your kids have to see that you have a relationship with confession, and that not just that you go, but that the relationship manifests in better behavior, calibrations of behavior in your life. Yeah. So much modeling comes back to how that's going in the home. Yeah. And then also, are you comfortable in your own skin as a person, right? Like that, where you're yourself, but not yourself in an unashamed way, like, or an unhealthy way, but like you know who you are, and you know God's place in your life, and you live that. When you model those types of things, the life of prayer, what I don't enjoy seeing is, like, the only time a parent prays is when they're making their kids pray with them. There's someone I know and respect very much who prays in their prayer corner in their home, and their kid walks by it all the time. And the kid, for many, many months, never went and prayed with him. He would always invite and never demand. And that was huge, because it's like, I'm going to do this, and you want to be a part of it, you're welcome. But you don't want to, you do you. You get there on your time. But like, the only time you pray, the only time you read, the only time, no, that doesn't work. You've got to live those things. And I think as parents, one of the scariest things that we can do is become wise in our own understanding. And life naturally makes you do that. I tell many graduates and young people, you're only going to get smarter, more confident, more assured of yourself. And if you don't have spiritual habits and discipleship built into your DNA, by the time you're in your mid-20s, you're in for a lot of trouble in your marriage, with your kids, and with your professional life. It shows up everywhere. We all, when you don't have anything, when you've done nothing special, of course you're a disciple, because someone has to teach you how to fish, right? But now you know how to catch fish, kick rocks, hold my stuff. I got this. No, it doesn't work, right? So that's where I think it really starts, is the modeling in the home. And then the other thing that I wish more parents did, and this is not just related to spiritual, but it's every phase of the parenting life. Catch your kids doing things right, right? Don't go here and make some massive celebration. Like, you see them pray. Oh, thank God you pray. It's like, come on, man. Like, there's no reason for you to throw a hafla because, they're doing this. But like, you notice that, oh, I'm going to confession. That's really awesome. And you find, and you pray, like, randomly. Like, I just want to tell you, that was like, it brought a lot of peace to my heart, because I know that you think it's important too. Those silent, subtle moments of praise, catching people doing things right. That's what really validates that someone's on the right path, because our kids for many years crave our approval deeply, right? And so if we're not prudent about being stewards of that influence that we have, we will lose it, right? Or it'll be used inappropriately. And neither one is acceptable before God.
Yep. And I think what you're saying, Abuna, which is so convicting, at times, the piece of living out our faith, that we're not asking of our children things that we ourselves are not taking seriously in our own spiritual life, or even as we struggle, not that we do those things.
That's the key.
Perfectly. And then what it means then to see our adolescents as they can maybe sometimes ask for those things in ways that we're not necessarily translating to, because it looks a little different when they're 5, when they're 10. So what does it mean for a 15-year-old to ask to be seen, to ask to be known? And I think you touched on that in the beginning of our conversation. Sometimes it's that acting out behavior, or it's feeling like there's a little bit of distance, and then what it looks like to then connect and to draw in a little bit differently.
And this is something that, I feel strongly about is we have to give our kids safe spaces in our homes to be themselves. And we may not like what they're doing, but we can't lose our mind over it. For example, one of the biggest places that we misuse our stewardship of influence is the dinner table. When your kid's coming home from dinner or coming home from school and you're asking them how their day was, and they tell you, oh yeah, I turned that paper in late. You always do this, Did you have to? What's going to happen now? What's your grade in the class? Are you ever going to get into college? Will you become a doctor? You'll never get married, and then you're not going to have kids, and you're going to hate your life. Yeah. What? What just happened? Yeah. But it's like, we can't let it go.
Yeah.
Or, or they were sarcastic with someone, or the way they're telling you a funny story. Oh yeah, this person tripped and fell on their face, and is it wrong? Yes, correct it. Is the time to correct it at dinner? When they're telling it, like, think about this for a second from an emotional perspective.
Sure.
I'm laughing about something that I think is funny.
Yeah.
And I think you're going to laugh. And you go, not funny. I'm like, ha!
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, my feeling just goes all over the place. And that creates an invalidating environment.
Sure.
Now, people are going to hear and say, oh, Abuna's saying don't correct our kids. I am not a permissive parent on any stretch of the imagination. Yeah. I just pick and choose when I'm going to do it. You don't let it lie. You don't let it lie for 7 days and then come and blow them up, right? They let it go. But you don't have to get it at dinner in that 1 hour window, because what happens when they become so disillusioned by correction that they have no desire for connection, phone comes to the table, iPad comes to the table, eat fast and go. Got to get to my friends. And then what if every parent say, you don't want to spend time with us. You don't enjoy being around us. What? No, I wouldn't want to be around my spouse if every time I talked about what happened that I thought was funny or passionate, amazing, you're going to invalidate. I wouldn't want it. There's a time and a place for everything. We're not stewards of that time sometimes.
And I think what I'm hearing you say, Abuna, is that there's these building blocks for what builds relationship and for what allows us to cultivate those moments that maybe when they're 5, you're listening to them talk about, garbage trucks for, for 40, 50 minutes. But when they're 15 and that has been built into, there's a space where there's open conversation, where there's heart, where there's communication, then there's a little bit more of a window, a little bit more of a door for those kinds of relationships.
You want your kids to talk to you, but you have to give your kids a space to speak. And kids also have to be wise, right? Like there's no need, like, what will activate your parents too, right? Like the thing is, even this is a parenting conversation. This is also for youth as well. Youth need to be stewards of the time that they have with their parents, right? Like, your parent is not a tyrant. They're not. Your parent loves you dearly. Why do you, like, I was on vacation recently, and I saw a teenager, and he was going out, everything he was doing in the pool was just meant to anger his parents. Like, there's no desire to do anything more than like, he's swimming, and like his mom is talking to him, and he puts his head underwater and shakes his hair in her face, and she's like, my hair. And he's like, oh, totally didn't notice that. And then he's like rubbing the dad. She's like, don't touch me. He's just doing this. Like, use the time wisely. Then you're getting this monster. I don't know why you're so sensitive. No. They're not sensitive. You don't have boundaries either. And that's not appropriate. You want your parents to have restraint, but you don't have it either.
Sure.
Parents should model it. But kids got to do it too.
And what it means to be the adult first.
Yes.
I think because I know so often I'm asking of my children to be on the same level as I am with their emotional regulation or their respect for a conversation. And, even what you shared with me about what it means to, allow for certain things, because what you're really working towards is something much bigger, more profound. And there's a lot of discernment, I think, that goes into that. One of my boys came home and told me of like a dare to eat something really disgusting. And then he did it, and he got $5 from his friends. And in my mind, I'm like, so many thoughts, so many questions. And I'm like, okay, it's not the end of the world.
Am I going to pay for this later?
Yeah, right? Like, what did you eat? And then I'm thinking like, no, is this a sin? Is this something in his character? No, it's really not. And having to bite my tongue and to just be like, okay, that's fun, I guess.
Yeah. And it's like, no one's telling you as a parent, that's amazing, you ate dirt. No one's telling you to do that. But like to be able to say, okay, how'd that make you feel, right? And ask an open and curious question to let that person kind of know, like, I'm with you. I get it. And I just wish we were more careful about that. Like, yes, if your kid comes home and punch somebody in the face, no, dinner, you're blowing up dinner, right? Because that person blew up dinner. That's a natural consequence of an inappropriate, as you said, sinful action. But when we're talking about like, and the one that really gets them is school. Like parents get stuck with school. And it's because they're so worried about their kids' academic achievements and their futures. I'm going to say something that sounds horrible, so forgive me. Like, nothing you do up to middle school academically matters. It doesn't.
You're just building habits.
You're just building habits. That's it. So you're sitting here, oh, you got 77. Oops. Okay. And is that going to mean he's not getting into Harvard? No, because they look at his high school transcript, right? They look at his SAT score. They look at his extracurriculars, not when he was 6, right? But when he's 16. And so we got to be smart about like when we're going to panic on a future and we're going to make everything a future conversation. But because we are a plan first, control first culture, we make that mistake, right? You can't fail to plan and let life happen, but you've also got to be sensitive to the fact that you're building habits. As a priest in confession, we hear tons of stuff where we're just like, oh my goodness, I so badly want to shake you, right? And for the sake of building the relationship, you might bite your tongue. And how you calibrate that is more gentle later in the conversation. And it's more loving that you've affirmed the understanding of why they did what they did without validating the sin itself. That's the shift. And as a parent, I'm telling you, priests would be less busy if parents did this.
And I know this is what I experience in my own relationship with my father of confession. There's such a gentleness and a tenderness in what I'm bringing up and in what I'm sharing, even as an adult, as someone who's, midway through their life still struggling with so many things that we are so harsh on our children for, and to receive that kind of love, to then be able to allow that to then guide our parenting. I think what can sometimes be hard is when there's an absence of that, and then we're parenting from a void. We're parenting from emptiness. So speak to that parent, Abuna, who is finding themselves kind of empty-handed in looking at their teens struggling, maybe disconnected from church, from family life, and then not necessarily even knowing where to start with that.
So the thing is, everything you talked about is an elephant, right? And the only way you eat an elephant, as I was taught by a mentor, is small bites. Like always start with the individual habits, right? Like nothing shows a child or an adolescent that you're serious as change. I was saying this last night to our youth. When people make radical changes overnight, everyone's skeptical. Why? Because everybody can do something radical for a moment, but it's about the steadiness that proves that there is change, right? Paul has a moment of lucidity, right? And the scales fall from his eyes. And let's say he goes off and he writes one epistle and calls it a day. Well, that doesn't mean anything, right? He reverted. But no, it was a steadiness in that walk. And that's the thing, is pick something to be steady in, whether it's to steadily get it back into the spirit of confession and prayer and your spiritual routines, steadily, be the one to put your phone in the other room at dinner. Pick one thing you're not going to poke at, or you're going to leave school alone. Catch them doing one thing right, like trying to set a manageable bar on one or two things and doing them well for 2 to 3 months. Show somebody you're serious, okay? And you got to be okay with not getting results. You know why? Because you weren't giving results for maybe 7 to 10 years. So because you ain't giving, you may not be getting. And you got to be cool with like, I might get rejection. I might get dismissed. If I've never brought my wife flowers or done anything sweet for her, and then I do it one day, she's going to be skeptical. I'm going to say, oh, I knew this would happen. This is why I never did it. No, you keep going because you want to win her heart and you want to win your child's heart. That's your job as a parent. You can't lose your kid. And we all are afraid of losing our kids without being able to do the things necessary to keep them. Be steady in the walk. Be steady in the pursuit. That's what changes your life and changes their life. Because you're like, no, you're worth it, kid. You're worth it. You're worth it that I may have done this for 45 years my way. And I know it's not right. And I can't lose you. And those changes, there's no such thing as too late. Even if it doesn't look the way you want it to look, that you're best friends and you talk about everything, it doesn't mean you lost, because the door is still open. God works, his grace works in those margins.
And I think what you're speaking to, Abuna, is so profound, because that's where the grace of God meets us.
Yes.
It's not in doing things perfectly, and it's not in, having that change overnight that we then expect people to just accommodate to our growth, but that we're in it with them, and that we're adjusting and we're refining in that process by God's grace to move and to not get stuck.
Yes.
Where it can feel so easily to be discouraged at times. And, I'm curious as I'm hearing you talk about what that perseverance then looks like, how do we then as parents meet our children in those spaces where maybe we're noticing patterns. I'm thinking of the adolescent that, maybe is learning to talk a little bit differently to their parent, or we're noticing some peer relationships that aren't very healthy. So how does a parent who's trying to make those changes get in there in a way that feels consistent, as you're saying, slow, gentle, but steady?
Yeah, absolutely. And look, never mistake the desire for connection to mean that there's no place for correction, right? I don't care if you haven't done any of the stuff that we're talking about. When your kid is doing things consistently and building patterns that are unhealthy, a conversation needs to be had. Some of the nice language that I learned in my life that I think is helpful, questions like, help me understand what you meant when you said this to me. Help me understand what you meant. Because this is what it sounded like. It sounded like you were disrespecting me. Or you sounded like you don't care what I think. And when you curiously ask, what you're doing is you're forcing someone to activate their executive functioning, their decision-making tree up top, and weigh the options. Do I double down and spit in this person's face, or do I think it through and try to calibrate, right? And there's firmness in that curiosity, right? It can be leading, but you have to step in and do your job as a parent. But curious questioning is always good. And sometimes that means in the moment, you shut something down quickly. Like, we're not doing this. I can't. And you walk away. Or it should always be, and this is important, like the parent should always walk away. Don't expect someone that is learning emotional regulation to emotionally regulate. You, as a parent, fully developed prefrontal cortex, you should know how to walk away. You know why? Because in your marriage, you better be walking away. At work, you better be walking away. In interpersonal relationships, you better be walking away. So there are times to just get up and leave. And the thing that we do is we get right up to the precipice or the crevice, or not the crevice, but the precipice of snapping. And then we think we can walk away. No. You're on your tippy toes already. And this person sneezes, farts, and they fall over. Like it's a wrap. Yep. You got to know your triggers as a parent and know what are the things that activate you. If you come home from work and you got smacked down, you know you're in a mood. So you need to be vulnerable. And this is something that parents won't do. Parents won't be vulnerable with their partners or with their kids about their own mental state, right? You can't use it as an excuse and a crutch of like, oh, I'm just not in the mood today. I just can't. If it's all the time, then that's a you problem, not a circumstantial problem. But you taking the time to come home and be like, look, I want you guys to know I'm pushed today. I got smacked down at the office. Or, stuff going on with the family's been really hard, or whatever. I don't have much tonight, right? Like you're kind of laying the table. And that also means that you notice that if there's conflict in the home, you might be telling the other parent, hey, you might need to step in on this because if I do, it's going 0 to 100. Now, I'm telling you all this, and you're going to get it even if you do everything right. you're only going to win 80% of the time, because 20% is the irrational crazy that nobody can unscrew. Like, you know, like you think you've got it all covered and everything's fine, and you go take a walk and you've prayed and meditated and your kid throws a diaper out the window. I'm sick of all, and you're dead. That's, you know, and so that's going to happen, right? So the first part of it is trying to learn when to walk away and knowing yourself and being vulnerable about your needs. The second half, and this is the one that I think people need to hear more of, is rupture is going to happen. Ruptures are normal in conflict when you have to correct, but repairs are what are uncommon. You need to repair, and repairing is not your kid saying sorry. One of the best things about being a good parent is learning early to apologize when you're out of line. I can tell you that I'm wrong for how I spoke to you while still being right about what I was telling you, right? I'm sorry that I yelled. I'm sorry that I used demeaning language. Both of those things were inappropriate and unfair to you as a person. And me telling you not to throw diapers out the window is still stands. It's disrespectful and it's impolite and it's not going to fly. Okay? So it's that willingness to repair when you do snap. Like, you are not weak for saying, I'm sorry to your child. You are strong, because what you are teaching them is even parents fall. And by teaching this vulnerability, you will teach them to be vulnerable and accountable. What we do on the other end, unfortunately, is we actually facilitate an environment of defensiveness with our unwillingness to be accountable. And our kids then feel that then they're always wrong. And if you're always wrong, then you always want to be right, because you never want to suffer.
And what I'm hearing you say, Abuna, is that we don't do those things because we're looking for the result. Right? Because the result doesn't, or the outcome doesn't dictate whether what I was doing was right or wrong, right? Like, we might do the right thing, we might struggle, we might persevere and still come up empty, and not because God isn't there and in those moments, but that it takes work.
Yes.
And certainly when we're talking about an adolescent who's learning their own emotional regulation, who's learning their world, what matters to them, that there has to be a level of patience and gentleness in that process. And I think maybe what I heard you say was that warmth and that authority are always just kind of coupled together. And when you lean too much into one and dismiss the other, then you're off balance in your approach as a parent.
And St. Anthony says it, right? St. Anthony says the middle way saves. And the middle way of parenting saves. And that's to also acknowledge that there will be times that you will be overly lenient because you're tired. And there will be times that you are overly firm because you're pushed. And as long as you can migrate back to the center, you have a probability of maintaining the relationship. And also be vulnerable about what you're trying to do. I care for you. I'm trying to tell them, I'm trying to parent you in a way where you realize what you're doing is wrong, but I don't make you feel like you're a bad person. You can do wrong things and not be a bad person. We're teaching this sometimes to adults, right? Because of the guilt that manifests. And this is, you talked about the outcomes. One of my biggest passion points is to tell people, you're not responsible for the outcomes. You're responsible for the process. God is responsible for the outcomes, because you can do it all right and still get a terrible outcome with your kid. But the process is what perfects you. And that's what gives God the margin to work, like we talked about with the grace earlier. So you just got to commit and be faithful to the process. Repetition is what will get you results in the end. And the result is your own transformation of the heart, right? Not the transformation of your kid's heart. Okay, like Moses handled his business just fine with Pharaoh. And it took 10 times before man's heart, was unhardened, right? So it's not all about you. You can do it all right and still get a bad result. And that doesn't mean that you weren't perfected through the process. What Moses was taught through that process was to depend on God more. He was transformed through the process. And Pharaoh then eventually yielded on God's time.
And as you described, Abuna, that process of being honest with our children and vulnerable with the areas where we need to course correct. And I'm thinking of my own experience, or many parents' experience, that maybe that wasn't modeled for them. Not that we weren't deeply loved, not that we weren't deeply cared.
Calm down, parents. You were loved. You were loved. We know we were loved. Sorry.
But that maybe there was this thought process that if you are to admit wrongdoing, or if that you are to admit that you needed to change something, that you are then abdicating your parental authority, that there was something fundamentally wrong with what you were doing. And so, speak to the parent who's had an absence of that modeling and how we do that well, because, we're not throwing our hands up in the air and saying, I don't know what I'm doing. But at the same time, we're trying to model something real and something active in our own lives.
It's such a great point, Clara. Like, if you haven't seen it before because of how you were raised, that is just there's elements to that. There's a generational element to that. There's a cultural element to that. But what I'll challenge, unfortunately, is there's not a spiritual element to it. Right? And so, this is why we talk about the modeling of the spiritual life, because as we model the spiritual life, what we're trying to do is get closer to be like Christ. And Christ obviously was perfect, but Christ told us to forgive others so that we could also be forgiven because of our flaws, right? And so that meant that there was fallibility inside of us. So you got to be accountable to, so don't be afraid of being accountable, and learn how to microdose it, right? Microdose. So practice in simple calibrating areas. Maybe what you did is you corrected your son at dinner and it was too much. Okay, work on, hey, I didn't like what you did, but it wasn't the time. Shouldn't have done that. My bad.
I came across too strong.
Yeah, my bad. It's a very simple thing, right? Versus like you have a blowout and you say a couple of awful things. And now you're trying to find a way to double down, to come back from that.
Had you not said this,
exactly.
had you not done that.
Yes, right. And so what you'll do is, what we usually do is we attempt to implement these types of changes on these macro issues, and then we don't like the result, or we're afraid. You have to do things in the small places and start there. St. Augustine says that a little thing is only a little thing unless it's done repetitively, and then it becomes a great thing, right? And so when you learn how to do it in the small places, you'll get the repetition and muscle memory, and it'll show that you're quick to repair the micro ruptures that you're making, and that will give you the confidence then that when you do have a catastrophic blowout, that you've built the sweat equity and the spiritual equity to move forward. To the parent that hasn't done this before, you're not going to be great at it in the beginning, right? But ask yourself, as I ask myself, how much of that is my pride? How much of that is my pride? Is because other places in my life as a man or as a woman, I'm being corrected and I'm being forced to be humble in order to keep my job, in order to maintain my friend circle, in order to keep the people in my life that I want to keep. So I don't want to do it here. Because when you're real about that, you'll realize it's not just generational and cultural. It's a spiritual war that we're fighting. And it goes back to what we said earlier. The older you get, the more set in your ways and confident you are in what you're doing. And you just don't want to deviate. And there's always, listen, even when you're wrong, yes, there are people that are the runway for your wrongness, right? Like, yeah, they probably said something rude that sets you off. But sorry, if your boss makes a sarcastic comment, you can't punch him in the face. You just can't, right? But for some reason, you can smack your kid in the mouth and tell him, "Don't you dare!" No, like, or your spouse can say something disrespectful, and you can't just go 10 times harder and say, "I should never married you," right? Like, no, that's not a win. So you've got this grace, and this is why I'm saying it's a pride thing. You've got this grace for everyone that's an equal and a peer, or those that you're at an imbalance with, and you want that grace, right? But if you can't give it to those who you are responsible for, then what you've done is you've then abused your authority. So it's that ugly confrontation of that. And then again, that's why the self-examining is so important. If you do it on the inside, you don't have to go, embarrass yourself and say, I should have. No, I know what I have to do. I got to work on this. So that's where you start.
Yep. And sometimes even if the words are hard in the beginning, leading with the action that shows that that's real, that's heartfelt, that there's something that's actually going to create movement in our life with that, and not just, lip service to that being like what I want you to hear versus how I'm actually then going to course. Correct.
But I also want to talk about that too, because I think people can take it to an extreme with the actions, right? Like, I don't know if you remember when we were kids, you'd see like parents mad at each other, or, people in church mad at each other. And how do they fix it? No one says sorry. Best هجيب لك شاي.
Yeah.
أعمل لك شاي. هجيب لك فستان. يعني you bring a cake to someone's house.
Yep.
Like خلاص, let's get over it. No.
Yep.
You can't gift your way to grace. You can't.
Yeah.
You try to do that, and what you're teaching is that money and power buy you grace.
Yeah.
Grace was not bought.
Yeah.
It was not bought. It was freely given. Okay? And so we have to freely give.
Yeah.
And give of our hearts. Christ gave us his grace to attain salvation from his heart. It's the same exact thing here. Like, give, but give from your heart. Like, if you're going to show up with flowers, you're going to show up with a gift. Be accountable and say the words. I'm doing this because I just want to tell you how sorry I am. And because this wasn't okay.
Yep.
That's how you're marrying some of the temporal material stuff to the spiritual. And that's okay. That's fine. But don't just give this and say that's enough.
Or allow that to be sufficient.
Exactly.
Yep. And if it is, maybe it's acts of service or things that actually feed the soul a little differently, not to discount words, but you know, we tend to be on a spectrum. Like I'm a talker. I like I can enter into my words very, very easily, but that's not always how some of us are able to express our thoughts and our feelings. And we're always going to be on a continuum with that. So to enter into that place that feels genuine to who you are and who God created you to be without missing the mark for what your child needs.
Exactly.
Also,
completely agree.
In that process. And so, Abuna, maybe transitioning then to, because I heard you say how important that spiritual component of our pride, our awareness of what our faith looks like, and then how that flows into the way that we engage with our children. And I'm curious what you see pushes our adolescents away from the church and what draws them in. So if you can contrast those two things for us a little bit.
Yeah, so I think there are a few things, right? Like, I think when we look at what draws them in, and we start there, what draws them in is understand, like, making them feel seen, right? Like, this is a huge thing. Now, being seen doesn't mean, oh, you're the loudest person in class, we're going to allow it because what? No. Being seen, there's check-ins. Like, this is where it starts with the servants, right? In the Sunday school. Like, are we checking in and doing this and doing that? You know, that's a huge part of being seen. You know, I advocate to some of our servants, like, hey, just shoot a text to the kid asking how they're doing. Even if they tell you, fine, okay, or whatever, that doesn't matter. Your job is not to get them to talk to you. Your job is to let them know that you took enough time to contact them, right? That makes them seen.
That your presence is felt and missed.
Exactly, right? When you can catch them doing things right and you praise their gifts and you put them in positions to let their gifts thrive. You know, I heard a story once and it made me so sad. There's a young man that was far from church and was wanting to come back. And he said, I want to serve. And he was like maybe 14, 15 years old. And he went to one of the head servants in the church and said, I want to serve. And the servant said, we have a service for you. And took him to clean toilets in the church. That was his first experience. It's like, look, this boy does not clean toilets in his home.
Must have been a very humbling experience.
He didn't do it. He didn't do it. He's like, no.
Wow.
He's like, yeah, right. Okay. This is what you want me to do?
Got it.
I'm good. No, it's a turnoff. You're not even thinking about what this person does well, who they are. Nothing about them is being focused on, right? We're just looking at the problem that they are and the need that we have. That is a selfish viewpoint from within the church. So we have to look at what they're like. If you see someone, you see their gifts, right? If there are kids that are extroverted, for example, we should be leveraging and leaning on them to be welcoming to other kids and teaching the spirit of inclusivity. If there are kids that are introverted, we should be encouraging them like to speak up so that we can get the thoughtfulness that's inside of them, that we can teach profoundness to others, right? Yeah. Those are things that let you know someone is seen. You identify what makes them them. What I also find is important is cultivating the spirit of community, right? And the spirit of community, it comes twofold. Kids do, like, it's so funny. When you see kids interacting together it's like a social experiment, and they're all socializing one another. Who's putting who down? Who's doing this to what? Whatever. But what I find is you've always got to have levels of commonality that you guys can all identify in. And that means you got to do activities that give them places to stand, to be able to bond. If you just want them to all sit together and talk, guess what? People that vibe on certain things because of family, because of activities, because of lifestyles, that'll happen. People that don't talk much won't talk to many and might talk to one. And people who talk to everybody will feel left out of something, right? So you have to actually be intentional about what you do to allow people to feel like they're a part of a community. They can look past their differences because you've got them focused on their commonalities, right? So that's another important part of what brings them in.
Yeah.
And then I think the third part of what brings them in, I think it's explanation and teaching, right? Like, don't just tell someone to be quiet. Don't just tell someone, you're wrong. Ask them why they think they're doing something.
Or where that comes from.
Where it comes from. Help me understand, right? My favorite question. And then explain. Parents, sorry to say this, but we had it too. Like, your kid's asking you questions in the liturgy as a young man or a young woman. Like, because Abuna does this. No. Why does Abuna go around the whole church during the Pauline epistle? Because St. Paul went all over the world. Like, know your stuff, right? And if you don't, that's a good question. I don't know. Let's go ask somebody. Be vulnerable and say, I'm going to get you the answer, right? Like, if we all have the spirit of teaching inside of us and the spirit of explanation, our church makes a lot more sense. Our church is hard for young men and women. It's hard. The liturgy is hard. The languages are hard. The hymnology is hard. The theology can be hard. All of it. And I'm not saying like, oh, don't do it. I love all of our hymns. I love our church and our rites. And nothing is like our Good Friday. Nothing is like our Best of Week. Nothing feels like our Lent, for better or for worse. Nothing. And yet, we're not teaching enough about why to do this stuff. And giving them understanding, especially when that creates a connection to it. Right? And then if you flip the coin and you say, what disillusions them? It's that feeling of isolation. It's that feeling of always being corrected and unseen because you're always being calibrated or thrown into something, right? Dropped off. Like you're being handed off to somebody.
You're a nuisance that needs to be.
Exactly. And then you don't bother to explain, I'm not gonna, I don't care. That doesn't work. Like, our kids need that spirit of that feeling of community, and we have a big role to play in that. Servants, parents, it's like we're all so sensitive about people correcting our kids in church. Remember when we were kids? Oh my gosh, I remember one time I got it bad from an uncle, and my dad said, "Did you do it?" I said, "You didn't deserve it," and it was like, I didn't know where to go. And what did that teach you? Everybody's your parent. Everyone loves you enough. And I trust the spirit of every person in this building that they want you to go to heaven as badly as I do. That's what it should be. We don't have that. So we create factions. What pushes our kids away from the church? Drama. Parents, drama. Deacon, drama. Servant, drama. Like, priest drama. What are you doing? Hold the line. Be an adult. Realize where you are. Okay, if you're in a hospital, and that's the church's, as Chrysostom teaches, we're in a hospital, okay? And some of us as servants, priests, adults, we're medical assistants, nurses, and NPs, PAs, whatever. We have a responsibility not to make a scene in front of the patients, right? And not to make it hard for the patient to trust the care of the physician. But we ain't doing that. So you want to push your kids away? Be part of the drama. Get in your own way. Get in your own head. Be the issue on the legna. Be the issue with the deacons. Complain with the ushers. Oh my gosh. I can't stand it when I see this stuff because I'm like, you guys don't even realize that your kids are seeing everything you're doing. I'm going to defend my kid because you yelled at my kid.
Yeah.
Start with my kid's wrong and then work backward to, hey, there's a better way to do that, right? Don't be defensive. That's your own, again, pride.
Yeah.
All of that gets in the way, especially you see in these bigger churches as we grow, that I don't know you well enough so you can correct my kid. It's like, dude, you think he's correcting because he's bored? No, he's not. He's either trying to protect the spirit of the prayer or he's trying to help that kid. He doesn't just want to hurt someone.
Yeah. And what you're describing, Abuna, is, two sides to the same coin.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways. I'm hearing you say that there's an intentionality about community, that we're seeing our adolescents gifting, that we're leaning into those things, and that there's prayer and truth with understanding, and not just an expectation that you're just going to accept whatever is put in front of you, especially for an adolescent who needs to wrestle
in this time too. ChatGPT, all the AI stuff, they can Google anything, right? I get people randomly, why is there a contradiction in the Bible here? Why, how do we know he's the Son of God? That means that they're getting information from outside. Abuna TikTok and Abuna ChatGPT, both priests, and they're not really priests, obviously, but both of these fake priests are dropping knowledge bombs on them, and they think that that's the reality of the world. And we're not equipped to do our part, and we're not going to meet them where they are. We're not going to help them. And that doesn't mean you have to have every answer. A medical assistant may not know the answer to a question that a patient has. But they can get a physician, they can get an NP, they can get a PA, they can get someone that's got more medical experience able to help treat that patient.
And I'm thinking of myself as an adolescent and as someone who really did think I had it all figured out and thought I had the world, in the palm of my hand. And, there's an experience that we have as parents that we've been wrong enough times and have been, by God's grace, put into line and have had boundaries in our life that hopefully we've learned something in that process. And I think it can be hard for a parent to meet what can sometimes feel like arrogance or an approach in adolescence that is maybe a little bit more natural to that stage. And how do we meet that with, again, a little bit of patience and gentleness, knowing that it's par for the course a little bit.
I actually like what you're saying, because there's it's been around forever, but I've heard it as a newer trend coming back, fool around and find out. I'm being gracious as I say it, but sometimes our kids need natural consequences. Okay. There's a balance between allowing someone to do something catastrophic to their life and allowing someone to take a cut or a bruise that they've earned, right? And so, we as parents, because we're so afraid of our kids being harmed, as we should be as parents, because we love them, we're trying to stop anything. But even with my 3-year-old, I notice things he'll do where he might take a toy away from another kid, or he might, bump into someone and push them. And sometimes I'm like, okay, you might need to find out what it means when someone doesn't want to play with you.
Or you get pushed back.
Or get pushed back. And then you might find out that's not very smart, right? It's different than you're standing on a balcony and you want to climb over. No, I'm going to grab you because I'm going to save you. So we have to let our adolescents, part of them developing maturation and wanting to depend on us, is us not forcing ourselves into every facet of their lives, right? Sometimes they want something like, oh, I want to date and I'm 14 years old. Okay, that's what you want to do. Go ask your father confession about it, right? Let's see what he says. There is not going to be any father confession that's like, this is a good idea. Let's get you started now. And by the time you're 24, you guys will be pure, I'm sure, and you'll make it happen. No, that's not going to happen, right? So sometimes you're passing the buck and saying, I have views on this. If you want to hear them, I'll share them. I think you got to get your father confession's blessing and I'll follow what he says, right? And then there are other things where you're going to say, okay, you want to try that? Okay, go ahead and try that. You got to have limits, and really it's within the marriage itself. As the parents agree on things, agree on what you guys will let them fool around with and find out about, and what you say I got to protect them from. But I think that we have to give them more autonomy. Part of how they become confident in themselves is that they learn to fall without failing, okay? Falling is part of humanity. Many of us fell because we did it quietly behind closed doors, right? And what that means is when you fall, very rarely will anybody care to pick you up, right? This thing about adolescents sneaking out, for example, or adolescents going somewhere they're not supposed to be. They didn't tell their parents. Well, guess what happens? When the party goes wrong, when there's a fight, when a cop shows up, when something happens, which inevitably something happens, doesn't mean you're going to get arrested, doesn't mean you're going to die, but something unfortunate will happen. Who do you call? You're not calling mom and dad, right? So what are you doing? Your friends who were your homies, who had your back, who would take care of you, they ain't there because they were covering their butts. So what do? You just say, I got to figure it out. Instead of saying, they know where I am. They gave me the opportunity. It didn't work. Let me call.
Yeah.
Right? So as a parent, you have to be permissive in the sense that you have to let them fall sometimes. Allow that to happen, because that arrogance then becomes humbled, not by you, but by the world. Right?
Yeah.
Fool around and find out.
And I think there's a real wisdom in what you're speaking to and being selective about that process, where if we're either too restrictive and we're not allowing for autonomy and agency, or for them to kind of bump up against a few things, or we're so permissive that, you know, I talk to some adolescents, which like, I wish I had more boundaries, you know, in my adolescent years. And so, you know, you're always kind of needing to adjust and shift and kind of re-examine, you know, having the conversations as a parental unit of saying, this was maybe too much, or now we didn't give enough, you know. So there's a lot of movement, I think, in that process.
I was told once, my dad said this. He said to me when I was telling him when we first had Isaac, he said to me, I was like, this is freaking hard. Like, I don't understand what's going on. And I told him, I was like, did you do this with me? What about this? And he said to me, you didn't come with a manual, kid. You didn't, right? There are 18,000 books and no manuals, because every kid's temperament, needs, ailments, weaknesses are different, right? And so you have to constantly be adjusting, and your willingness to be accountable to your kid and say, look, you know, we thought giving you autonomy in this area was okay. And what we realized is it's actually being more harmful. So we have to work on dialing it back together. So let's work on that, right? Or saying like, look, you know, we realize we're maybe suffocating you a little bit. We're going to give you a little bit more space to breathe. I will say though, as a parent, it's always better to be tighter than it is to be looser.
And then find out what
right? Because when you're trying to take back agency, you get resentment, right? And that's when they become a child. But when you're loosening the noose, so to speak, not that no one should be hanging their kids, right?
Or the reins. Exactly. You're tightening the reins.
Tightening the reins. Like, what you're trying to do is say, hey, you know what? Okay. You know, number one, you had the spirit of obedience, and we appreciate that. Or we see that like this isn't, you're not joyful about this. You're angry. This isn't working. We're gonna give you a little bit more air, and tell them like there's natural consequences for your choices. I give you an extended curfew, and you decide that you're gonna push it even further. No problem. Dispassionately, I need your keys, and don't do it. You know, the thing is, parents aren't consistent either, right? With that, like, be consistent. Punish when you say you're gonna punish, and permit when you say you're gonna permit. When you slide the scale constantly, not in calibrating the agency for them, but in the consequences associated with their choices.
Based on how you're feeling.
Exactly, right? I just don't want to fight with him today. I'm not going to do it. No. Just like, I don't feel like going to work today. Oh yeah, you getting paid? You need to get your butt into work. Like, sorry. This is not, like, parenting is not a place to take time off. And I say that as a parent, knowing I'm weak too, and I struggle with it. And so it's not about being perfect. It's about being good. And even if you are permissive, you explain, I wasn't supposed to be permissive. I'm making a bad choice. I'm letting you know I'm owning it. And it's coming back next time. There's no bending, right? And that's you being accountable and holding the line, right? So when you're vulnerable about your weakness, but you're also aware that like you tighten, you start tight and you loosen slowly, you're able to work with them in creating that spectrum of agency and autonomy so that they learn how to fall without feeling afraid of failure.
And even that concept of like falling or failing forward rather than staying stuck in place. And, you know, as I'm hearing you say that, Abuna, the thought comes to mind for me about the intention of why our children are understanding there's that calibration process. Is it for me, for my own good, or is it because there's a level of embarrassment or a reflection of you as a parent, you know, on what might be going on in our family life? And that's why you're course correcting versus what's actually best for me as your child, as someone dearly loved, dearly seen, dearly known.
I can't tell you how important what you said is, Clara. Like, if you're doing this, parents, if you're doing this because you're worried about what people at church think about you, what your parents, what your friends think about you, it's wrong. And when you justify that way, your justification is hollow and your kids resent you. But when you do this because you love them and you make it about love and you make it about what's right and what's right in front of God, you will be protected. You will be honored, and they will not necessarily love it, but they will come to understand it. That is, wow.
Yeah.
Like you brought me back to some horrible conversations. I shouldn't this. So what about people?
Yeah.
They don't mean anything. God means everything.
Yeah.
You, my child, mean everything to me. That's what matters.
Yeah. And you're playing that long game of knowing ultimately what that means 10 years later, 20 years later.
Correct.
You know, and as you parent into adulthood. And Abuna, as we kind of wrap up our conversation today, which has been really enriching. I know awesome. We can talk for probably 2 more hours, but I know you have a life, things to get to. But, you know, I'm thinking of that parent who feels motivated to be intentional about what it means to parent their teen, and, you know, what it might mean to pray a little bit more intentionally in that process. And so if I'm that parent, give me what I ought to really be praying for my own heart and for my teen as I begin to engage a little differently.
Yeah, no, of course. I think the first thing is, you know, Lord, give me the spirit of consistency in my own life with you, that I may know you and come to love you the way that you deserve to be loved, right? And then when I pray for my kids, my prayer for my kids is, Lord, let my faithfulness be fruitful by your hand. Cover what I cannot, and shine light where they cannot see. I think these are such important things to pray for. And then the last part of that prayer, they are yours, Lord. We say that and we don't mean it. And there's a reason we don't mean it. We don't mean it because they're the most important thing in the world that God gave us. Like, you know it, you've got a couple, I've got a couple. Like, there's nothing like your kids. But when you learn to say, God, they are yours, and you believe it and you live it, you'll let them fool. You'll let them figure it out, because you know that as long as you're doing it righteously, he's right around the corner. He will catch what you can't. You will try to catch everything as a parent, and you will not. And you will blame yourself, because the spirit of control is rooted in the seed of arrogance. You're not meant to carry it all. He is. You didn't lose your kid. He made choices to walk away. Your goal is to just try to carve the guardrails for them. And when you have that spirit of, Lord, they're yours. Oh my gosh, what it does for your heart.
Yeah.
Because you know, he's got it.
I love that so much, Abuna, and what that means for us to cultivate a spirit of trust and dependence on God in our own parenting, and to be fully surrendering. I think that's the only word that comes to mind is really surrendering, that not to our own way of thinking, not to parenting books, whatever that might be, but to really just hand that to God. What a beautiful reminder. And we really thank you for your time, and for I know has been a very enriching conversation for me personally. I'm going to need to unpack so much of it in my mind. And so we pray that if you've also been blessed by this conversation, and we hope it really has been enriching for you, for your home, for your family, that you continue to keep us in prayer as we continue to keep your family in prayer as well. And we just thank you.